Record profits in the middle of a crisis should be enough to make anyone pause. Yet in the United States, the normalization of corporate greed has reached such heights that even the spectacle of billion-dollar windfalls during a time of household desperation is shrugged off as the market doing its job. But this is the sleight of hand. What looks like a market simply adjusting is actually corporations seizing the perfect opportunity to expand their margins under the cover of inflation. Families are told that higher grocery prices are the inevitable fallout of global supply chain disruptions, when in reality many of those price hikes far exceed any genuine increase in costs. The story of inflation, when told honestly, is not about scarcity. It is about power, about who has the leverage to set prices and who is forced to absorb them. Consider the food industry. In the same months that parents skipped items in their grocery carts, some of the largest food conglomerates in the country announced record-breaking profits. The logic was simple. Consumers had been primed to expect rising prices, so corporations raised them even further, pocketing the difference as pure gain. Oil companies played the same game, citing global turmoil and refining costs while quietly celebrating historic windfalls. Landlords hiked rents at double-digit rates, justifying the increases with vague gestures toward inflation, even though their own costs rose far more modestly. The result was a form of legalized looting. Ordinary people paid more, not because costs had truly soared, but because corporations saw an opening to exploit fear. What makes this greed so effective is the disguise it wears. Wrapped in the language of inflationary pressure and economic adjustments, corporate profiteering is framed as an unavoidable response to global instability. Politicians repeat these talking points, economists package them into palatable sound bites, and the media circulates them uncritically. The public is left with the impression that everyone is suffering equally, that corporations are merely surviving the storm like everyone else. In reality, they are not just surviving, they are thriving, gorging themselves on an artificial scarcity they helped construct. This dynamic exposes a deeper truth. Inflation is not simply a byproduct of external shocks, but a stage for corporate opportunism. The very concept of inflation becomes a shield, an all-purpose excuse for companies to raise prices without scrutiny. Once the word is invoked, consumers are meant to stop asking questions. Why is a gallon of milk suddenly more expensive? Inflation. Why has rent skyrocketed? Inflation. Why is filling your car a financial burden? Inflation. The word becomes a magic trick, redirecting anger away from the profiteers and toward abstract forces no one feels they can control. The most striking part of this spectacle is how little outrage it generates at the level of power. Instead of hearings on profiteering, instead of regulatory crackdowns on excessive corporate margins, we see only tepid debates about interest rates and monetary policy. The Federal Reserve responds by making borrowing more expensive for ordinary citizens, further tightening the noose, while leaving corporate excess untouched. This is not economic necessity, it is political choice. By refusing to challenge profiteering, the system effectively sanctions it. Ordinary people, meanwhile, are forced into impossible trade-offs. They work longer hours but fall behind on rent. They cut back on groceries but watch their utility bills creep higher. They skip medical appointments because copays have risen. At the same time, CEOs announce record bonuses, shareholders receive inflated dividends, and stock buybacks surge. This grotesque juxtaposition, families rationing while boardrooms celebrate, lays bare the truth that inflation in its current form is not just an economic challenge, but a moral one. And yet, the trolling discourse of American politics ensures that blame is never properly assigned. The right accuses the left of reckless spending. The left accuses the right of deregulation and neglect. Both sides weaponize the pain of ordinary citizens to score political points, while the corporations that actually engineer much of this pain glide by untouched. The result is a grotesque irony. The victims of profiteering find themselves not only paying more at the register, but also watching their struggles turned into fodder for partisan spectacle. Corporate greed in disguise is not new, but the brazenness of the current moment is striking. It tells us something essential about power in America. Crises are never wasted. They are opportunities for consolidation, for deeper entrenchment of inequality, for rewriting the rules in ways that favor those already on top. Inflation is the stage, greed is the script, and the public is cast in the role of the silent audience, expected to endure the performance without protest. But once you see the disguise for what it is, the theater loses its hold. Inflation stops looking like an impersonal storm and starts looking like what it really is, a heist conducted in broad daylight. Partisan trolling is the defining soundscape of American politics today. It is the background noise that drowns out serious discussion, the carnival music that plays while the house burns down. When it comes to inflation, this trolling has reached such a fever pitch that it no longer functions as commentary. It has become the spectacle itself. Rising prices are not simply a social and economic crisis. They are the raw material for memes, hashtags, and endless online skirmishes that substitute performance for accountability. This trolling serves a purpose. It distracts the public, divides communities, and keeps power untouched. Think about the way inflation has been framed in mainstream conversation. A grocery receipt showing absurdly high prices goes viral not as an invitation to analyze corporate profiteering, but as a joke about whichever party you already hate. If you lean right, you post it with a caption mocking Bidenomics or accusing Democrats of destroying the middle class. If you lean left, you repost it to highlight how Trump and Republicans hollowed out protections for workers and let corporations run wild. The receipt becomes less a document of everyday pain than a weapon in a meme war. And while millions laugh, comment, and argue, the corporations behind those inflated prices remain comfortably offstage, free of scrutiny. This is not an accident. Social media thrives on outrage, and political strategists know it. The more polarized the conversation becomes, the less likely it is to produce real solutions. Trolling, then, is not just a byproduct of politics in the digital age. It is an intentional tactic. Every viral joke about Biden falling asleep or Trump eating fast food serves to reinforce divisions while siphoning attention away from structural questions. Who sets the prices? Who benefits from inflation? Who is insulated from its impact? These are not questions trolls want asked, because serious questions require serious answers, and those answers often implicate the very system both parties serve. Cable news amplifies the same dynamic. Talk show hosts pit pundits against one another, reducing the crisis to a shouting match. Instead of asking why corporations are posting record profits during a supposed cost of living emergency, hosts encourage partisan blame games. One side blames reckless spending, the other blames corporate greed. But the framing ensures that viewers align themselves with a team rather than investigate the system. The audience is invited to boo or cheer as if they are watching a sporting event. In this way, politics is transformed into entertainment, and inflation becomes a plot point rather than a lived reality. The trolling extends beyond media into policy debates themselves. Republicans gleefully troll Democrats by mocking green energy policies as inflationary fantasies, while Democrats troll Republicans by portraying them as heartless defenders of billionaires. Both parties craft slogans designed to go viral rather than to inform. Legislation is debated not on the floor of Congress, but on Twitter feeds, where the loudest soundbite eclipses the most careful argument. Policy becomes performance art, staged for likes, retweets, and donations. Meanwhile, the public is not just an audience, it is forced to participate. Algorithms ensure that political trolling floods news feeds, nudging people into perpetual outrage. Scrolling through comments, one finds ordinary people hurling insults at one another, repeating talking points from politicians who will never know their names, instead of organizing against systemic exploitation. Citizens are locked in digital cage fights, convinced that dunking on strangers is a form of resistance. In this environment, solidarity is almost impossible to sustain. The public is atomized into rival camps, each side convinced that the other is the real enemy. The deeper tragedy is how this trolling erodes trust. When every economic hardship is immediately politicized, when every grocery bill becomes a partisan talking point, ordinary people lose faith in the possibility of honest dialogue. Inflation, instead of being a moment for collective action, becomes another wedge driving Americans further apart. And as the public fights among itself, elites enjoy the silence that surrounds them. No one storms the boardrooms where price hikes are planned. No one trolls the corporate press releases celebrating record profits. The outrage is successfully redirected downward and sideways, never upward. This phenomenon reveals the sophistication of modern power. In previous eras, distraction might have come from bread and circuses, from entertainment designed to pacify. Today, distraction comes from trolling wars that masquerade as politics. It feels participatory. People are posting, commenting, sharing, but in truth, it is deeply pacifying. The energy that could go toward protest, unionization, or organizing is instead burned up in comment threads and TikTok skits. The trolling becomes a pressure valve, releasing anger in ways that never threaten the system. Consider how the inflation debate has been weaponized in election cycles. Candidates do not talk about regulating corporate profits or imposing stricter anti-gouging laws. They talk about who to blame. Republicans will point to stimulus checks, painting them as reckless gifts that overheated the economy. Democrats will point to corporate consolidation, insisting that greedflation is the root. Both positions have elements of truth, but framed in trolling mode, neither leads to action. They are cudgels for campaigning, not blueprints for reform. Voters are left with the impression that change is impossible, that all they can do is pick which meme they like better. And trolling doesn't just distort understanding. It weaponizes shame. Working class people struggling with bills are mocked online for their choices. Why are you buying organic milk if prices are high? Why are you still driving a truck if gas costs so much? Why not get a second job? Instead of compassion, people encounter contempt. This cruelty is not just cultural, it serves power by ensuring that individuals blame themselves or each other for systemic problems. The cruelty keeps people isolated, ashamed to speak openly about their struggles, convinced that they are alone. The most insidious part of all this is that trolling feels harmless. It feels like jokes, like banter, like the chaotic chatter of democracy. But it is anything but harmless. It is the soundtrack of a society being systematically looted while laughing at its own pain. It is the nervous laughter of a people too busy mocking their rivals to notice their pockets being emptied. The joke, ultimately, is on the audience. When we see inflation reduced to trolling wars, we must understand what is at stake. This is not just bad manners or toxic discourse. It is a structural feature of modern politics. It ensures that the people most harmed by inflation never unite against those who benefit from it. It keeps citizens exhausted, angry, divided, and entertained, while the machinery of profiteering operates smoothly in the background. If there is any hope of breaking this cycle, it begins with refusing to take the bait. It begins with recognizing that trolling is not politics, it is its parody. The real struggle is not between left and right memes, but between the public and the small class of profiteers who manage the crisis. Until that truth is grasped, the trolling will continue louder and louder as the cost of living rises and the quality of life falls. And perhaps that is the darkest irony of all. The system doesn't just tolerate the trolling. It depends on it. ChatGPT said, who benefits from the noise? It is a deceptively simple question, one that cuts through the fog of memes, talking points, and partisan hysteria surrounding inflation in the United States. Every political circus, every trolling war on social media, every shouting match on cable news has an audience that laughs, jeers, or claps. But behind that performance are beneficiaries who quietly count their profits. The answer to who benefits is not the left or the right, not Biden or Trump, not the commentators battling it out on prime time. The real winners are the corporations, defense contractors, financial elites, and billionaire investors who thrive on distraction. The noise is not a side effect of the political economy. It is the mechanism that keeps it running. Inflation is supposed to hurt everyone equally. That is the myth. Prices rise, and supposedly every household feels the pinch. But this is not how it works in practice. For the top 1%, inflation is not a crisis, it is an opportunity. Rising prices provide cover for higher profit margins. Government responses, like raising interest rates, protect the value of capital at the expense of workers. And the relentless noise of partisan trolling ensures that the public never demands a deeper accounting of who is winning while everyone else is losing. Let's begin with corporations. The winners of inflation are easy to spot if you know where to look. Quarterly reports. In the very months when households cut back on food, skipped medications, and delayed rent, companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Shell reported some of the largest profits in their histories. The oil sector was not simply enduring inflation, it was feasting on it. Similar stories emerged from the grocery giants, where corporations raised prices far beyond the actual increases in their costs. Housing followed the same script, with rents skyrocketing not because landlords were suddenly paying more for maintenance or taxes, but because the moment allowed them to push the limits of what people would tolerate. Defense contractors are another class of beneficiaries rarely mentioned in discussions about inflation. While citizens debate whether social spending fuels inflation, billions of dollars flow unquestioned to the Pentagon and private arms manufacturers. Companies like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon thrive in these conditions. Inflation provides a convenient excuse to justify larger defense budgets. After all, if everything costs more, so too must the weapons and contracts. While households struggle to pay for groceries, the defense industry lobbies for and receives budget increases measured in tens of billions. Once again, the noise about partisan blame ensures that this redistribution of resources upward remains invisible. Then there are the financial elites, the banks and hedge funds who use inflation as a pretext to consolidate power. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates in its bid to control inflation, ordinary borrowers, people with credit card debt, mortgages, student loans suffer immediately. Payments increase, opportunities shrink, small businesses falter. Yet for large financial institutions, these rate hikes are a boon. They earn more on lending, and they can use distress in the broader market to buy up assets at a discount. Inflation, in other words, is a transfer of wealth from the struggling public to the insulated elite. But none of this would be possible without the noise. The memes, the partisan battles, the trolling exchanges on Twitter and TikTok. They are not trivial distractions. They are the smoke that hides the fire. When citizens are busy mocking Bidenomics or ridiculing Trump's gas price claims, they are not mobilizing against profiteering. They are not demanding investigations into price gouging. They are not uniting to hold corporations accountable. The noise ensures division, and division ensures paralysis. It is not difficult to see how the mechanics of trolling serve those in power. Imagine a family at the grocery store, stunned by the price of eggs. Instead of directing their outrage toward the corporate chain that quietly expanded profit margins, they are invited to argue online about whether Biden or Trump is responsible. The anger is real, the frustration is real, but it is redirected laterally, not upward. The system has perfected a kind of emotional judo, turning popular anger away from the architects of the crisis and toward fellow citizens. This strategy of noise benefits not only corporations, but also politicians themselves. For elected officials, inflation is a convenient club to beat opponents with not a crisis to be solved. Republicans wield it against Democrats as proof of fiscal recklessness. Democrats wield it against Republicans as evidence of deregulation and corporate capture. The point is not resolution. The point is narrative dominance. Every second the public spends consuming partisan drama is a second not spent analyzing who is actually profiting. Politicians know this. They depend on it. The media, too, profits from noise. Outrage is profitable. Memes generate clicks, anger fuels engagement, and conflict ensures repeat viewership. A sober, detailed analysis of corporate profiteering is not going to trend. But a meme of Biden falling off a bike with the caption, "Bidenomics in one picture," will. A split screen debate where two pundits shout over each other will. This is why inflation is always reported as spectacle and rarely as structural critique. Media corporations are not neutral observers. They are beneficiaries of the noise, monetizing public misery while shielding corporate sponsors from real scrutiny. The result of all this is a grotesque inversion. Those who suffer most from inflation, the working poor, renters, people on fixed incomes, are the least represented in the noise. Their struggles are fodder for jokes, their pain an instrument of political theater. Meanwhile, the very institutions engineering much of the crisis thrive in silence. The louder the noise gets, the safer they become. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because it reveals that inflation is not just an economic crisis, it is a political technology. It disciplines the public, enriches the elite, and generates a fog of trolling that ensures accountability never arrives. Every crisis is an opportunity for consolidation, and inflation is no different. By keeping the public divided and distracted, the beneficiaries of inflation are free to tighten their grip. So when we ask who benefits from the noise, we must be clear, it is not simply corporations or billionaires in isolation. It is an entire system, a choreography of media, politics, and business that transforms real suffering into theater, anger into entertainment, and crisis into profit. The noise is not accidental. It is the soundtrack of exploitation. And unless we learn to turn down the volume, to look past the memes and partisan smokescreens, the beneficiaries will continue to thrive while the public foots the bill. The American economy is not broken. That may sound like a contradiction when people are struggling to pay rent, skipping meals, or watching their wages stagnate while costs soar. But it is the only conclusion that makes sense when you step back from the noise of partisan blame. What looks like dysfunction is, in reality, design. Inflation is not proof that the system has failed. It is proof that the system works exactly as intended for the powerful. The crisis is not a bug. It is a feature. Think of the way the story is usually told. The economy has gone off track. Inflation is a problem that policymakers must urgently fix. The language assumes that the system was once balanced, fair, and functional, but has somehow been knocked off its axis. Yet, if we look at who wins and who loses during inflationary periods, a darker truth emerges. The same actors win over and over again: corporations, shareholders, billionaires, financial institutions. The same groups lose the working class, the poor, the middle class trying to hold on. If the outcome repeats with such precision, it cannot be an accident. It is the natural result of an economic architecture built to funnel wealth upward. This design becomes most visible in moments of crisis. Inflation, like recessions before it, becomes an excuse to redistribute resources from the bottom to the top. When prices rise, companies use it as cover to expand their profit margins. Landlords use it to justify rent hikes. Banks use it to charge higher rates. Meanwhile, workers are told to accept wage freezes in the name of responsibility. Social spending is cut under the guise of fighting inflation, and the public is instructed to believe that all of this is necessary. That belt tightening is patriotic, that sacrifice is shared. But sacrifice is not shared. Some are made to sacrifice everything, while others gorge themselves on the very crisis that supposedly demands austerity. Consider the Federal Reserve's response. To curb inflation, it raises interest rates, making credit more expensive. This directly harms ordinary people. Mortgage rates rise, credit card debt balloons. Small businesses struggle to borrow. But for large banks and investment firms, higher interest rates can be a blessing. They earn more from lending and gain opportunities to buy distressed assets when smaller players collapse. What looks like a corrective measure is, in practice, a mechanism of consolidation. The economy is not malfunctioning. It is funneling power where it was always meant to go. The same is true of government spending priorities. When inflation dominates headlines, politicians insist there is no money for housing initiatives, student debt relief, or universal health care. But somehow there is always money for defense contractors, for subsidies to fossil fuel companies, for tax cuts to the wealthy. The excuse of inflation provides cover for austerity aimed downward and generosity aimed upward. This is not a mistake. It is the operating logic of a system designed to protect capital at the expense of people. What makes this so insidious is the way it is hidden beneath the veneer of inevitability. Citizens are told that inflation is global, that supply chain disruptions and foreign wars are to blame, that no one could possibly intervene. The implication is that suffering is natural, unavoidable, the price of living in a complex world. But this ignores the decisions being made every day that deepen the crisis. It ignores the corporations that set prices higher than their costs, the landlords who exploit shortages to push rents up, the policymakers who choose austerity over relief. It ignores, most of all, that inflation is not a natural disaster. It is a political outcome shaped by power. The narrative of a broken economy also obscures the deeper reality. For the powerful, the economy has never been more functional. Stock markets surge even as wages stagnate. Corporate profits break records even as families drown in debt. CEOs walk away with bonuses that dwarf the lifetime earnings of their employees. If the system were truly broken, these outcomes would not be so consistent. They are not malfunctions. They are the point. This is why both parties use inflation as a weapon, but never as an opportunity for reform. Republicans wield it as evidence of democratic incompetence, insisting that government spending is the culprit. Democrats point to corporate greed, blaming deregulation and monopoly power. Both sides are partly right, but both stop short of structural critique. Neither questions why the system consistently produces crises that benefit the elite. Neither acknowledges that inflation, like recession and austerity, is part of a cycle designed to maintain hierarchy. The trolling, the blame games, the memes, they all serve to obscure the fact that the system is working perfectly, just not for you. If we strip away the theater, what remains is brutally clear. The economy does not exist to provide stability or dignity for ordinary people. It exists to generate profit for those who already hold power. Inflation is not a failure of that system. It is its confirmation. The fact that people are working longer hours, paying more, and receiving less while corporations and billionaires thrive is not evidence that the economy has broken down. It is evidence that the economy is functioning as designed. This perspective is not meant to inspire despair, though it is sobering. It is meant to cut through the illusions. As long as people believe the economy is broken, they will wait for it to be fixed. They will hope that policymakers will step in, that a change in leadership will restore balance, that the storm will pass. But storms do not end if they are not storms to begin with. A rigged system does not suddenly unrig itself. Seeing inflation as proof of design rather than dysfunction is the first step toward imagining something else. And yet, the trolling discourse ensures that most people never reach this realization. Instead of asking whether the system itself is the problem, they are encouraged to ask which party broke. Instead of uniting around the shared experience of being exploited, they are invited to mock one another online. The structure of the economy is invisible, while the spectacle of partisan combat fills every screen. The performance keeps the truth safely hidden. The economy is not broken. It is rigged. Once that truth is understood, the question becomes what to do about it. Rigged systems do not correct themselves. They are corrected by pressure, by organizing, by solidarity that cuts through the noise. Inflation, then, should not be seen only as a crisis to survive, but as an X-ray that reveals the bones of a system designed against the public. It shows us who profits and who pays. It shows us that the economy is not malfunctioning, but functioning perfectly for the wrong people. And it challenges us to stop waiting for the system to heal and start demanding a system built for us, not for them. When people were struggling with inflation and the prices of everyday essentials kept rising, America's biggest grocery chains were reporting record profits. Kroger openly admitted in its quarterly report that it had taken advantage of the inflationary environment. In other words, while customers were told that supply chain disruptions and fuel costs were pushing prices up, the companies used this crisis as a cover to raise prices even higher and expand their profit margins. Families were struggling to afford bread, milk, and meat, while corporations pushed their earnings to unprecedented levels. This is a clear case where the economy doesn't look broken, but rigged, because if the system were truly broken, companies would be suffering losses too. Instead, the opposite happened. Ordinary people became poorer, while corporations became richer. The defense industry provides an even sharper example. During the Ukraine war, when inflation dominated headlines in the U.S., defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon secured record-level contracts. Through aggressive lobbying in Washington, they managed to increase the defense budget year after year. Every new crisis was turned into a business opportunity. While the public was told that austerity was necessary to fight inflation, that social spending on healthcare or housing had to be cut, military spending kept rising. The result was a grotesque contradiction. Essential services for ordinary people were declared too expensive, while billion-dollar defense deals were justified as national security. What becomes clear is that crises are never experienced equally. For the general public, inflation is a burden, a daily pain. For corporations and defense contractors, the same crisis is a jackpot. The system works not by failing, but by distributing pain downward and profit upward.